We'll go ahead and get started. I first want to thank everybody for joining us this morning here at Gateway Exhibit Services for a seminar on the art and science of trade show success. My name's Ted Spees. I'm the general manager of Gateway Exhibit Services. We'll be hearing soon from our keynote speaker, Ed Jones. I do want to point out a few things. Everybody should have received a small pad folio with a notepad in it. Inside, there's a small booklet that will detail many of the topics that we'll be discussing today. The goal there is to give you the opportunity to take some of these principles and ideas back home with you and implement them successfully into your programs immediately. Our goal here is to provide ideas, suggestions that you can use immediately to make your trade show and event marketing efforts more successful. So, as I said, we'll be talking about what we term the art and science of trade show success. Any successful event marketing effort needs to effectively marry the creative concepts with the analysis and metrics that it takes to measure how successful you were in an effort to continually improve. We'll have two sessions today. The first this morning will be specifically on targeting, effective targeting. So determining exactly who represents the subset of event attendees or invitees who have sufficient authority and sufficient characteristics that they have a high probability of having the ability to provide real, tangible results for your event marketing efforts. And then the second session, starting at about 10:30, will focus on what we call the intersection of messaging and design. So developing effective messages to compel those targets to action and incorporating those messages effectively into your exhibit design, into your promotional design, and then, of course, into the design of the experiences you want to create throughout the trade show or event. We'll begin by diving in to the effective targeting for trade shows section. I do want to briefly introduce our keynote speaker. I know he's kind of been making the rounds this morning and introducing himself, but Ed Jones is a 35-year veteran of the trade show industry. He's worked with Fortune 100 companies down to small and medium-sized businesses to introduce effective communication and measurement concepts that lead to results. Ed's curriculum and thought leadership had been taught for many years at the Exhibitor Live Show every spring in Las Vegas, and we've entered into an exclusive strategic partnership with Ed to bring his principles and ideas to the next generation of trade show managers. So without further ado, I bring you Ed Jones.
Go. Now we're on. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I had turned it on before I put it in my pocket. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm really especially glad to see such a big turnout. This is fantastic. I have to tell you, I retired 2 years ago, and I don't know how many shows I've been to during the 30-plus years I did it, probably in the thousands, but there is no one inside a corporation that works harder or really has a lot more individual impact than people who are running the event marketing and trade show programs. If you think about it, it's one of the most visible faces the company has to its marketplace. And my challenge was always to try to take something that requires additional effort like measurement or calculating return on investment and find ways to do it that did not require more of your time to make it happen, because you don't have any time. You're finishing one show and trying to reconcile that show and starting up another one and on the road to boot while you're doing it, and the idea of spending a lot of extra effort and time doing something new is pretty hard. So one of my hallmarks over the years of my consultancy was to actually do as much as possible of that work internally for the clients that we had. So I just want you to understand everything that we talk about today is with the context in mind that it has to be pretty important and pretty effective for you to make room for something new or different in your way you do your job. And the fact that all of you are doing a fantastic job already of showing your company to the world. And so I put a pretty high bar on this for myself. I say at the end, I'm going to ask you the question, how many of you got something that you can actually use when you leave here today that's going to improve your ability to do your job or improve your program? And if the hands go up, then I will be satisfied that we've done a good job. If the hands don't go up, then I don't know what I would do, but that's the bar that I set for presenting. So welcome, we're glad you're here. Targeting. To be effective at a trade show, you pretty much have to be interacting with the people who can do something for you that provides any return on investment, right? And so how to get those people identified, get them into your exhibit, get them converted into, from prospects into customers, all relies on really doing a good job of targeting. So this is one of several modules that we have. We're going to do 2 of the topics today. There are 6 topics total. You'll probably be invited back for a seminar in the future on some of the other topics. And some of the other topics, too, are going to be made available as web-accessible training. So let's take a look at targeting. There's some fundamental concepts. How many of you have ever been in one of my classes before at Exhibitor or something like that? Okay. There's some fundamental concepts that apply to both modules we're going to talk about today, both targeting and messaging. And the first one is the idea of an action value chain. And to be successful with an event marketing approach, whether it's a trade show, a conference, whatever it may be, there's a critical relationship between the elements of messaging and getting any results. And the tie between those elements is action by the participant. So if you have an exhibit at a big industry show, and you have people come and see you, and they learn they can repeat what it was you wanted them to learn. They can say, yeah, I got points 1, 2, and 3. I remember the product name. I was impressed, etc. All that can be good. You can get an A+ on memorability, on clarity, on even, preference. But if they don't do anything, what do you really earn from that? And so the key is, if the people who visit your exhibit act as a result of their visit, then you stand the potential to get a return on investment. If nobody does anything, then you're probably not. There will be some people that initiate their own, contact with the sales team or the distributor or whatever. Some of your sales team will be successful at following up on a lead and getting that to go. But by and large, most of the people that we see in trade show exhibits don't actually do a specific action step as a result of their visit. And so that action is the essential element in getting good or big return on investment. So we'll see how central that is to both planning and messaging as we go. So to get to any results that are monetary, you have to have a message that is clear, logical, persuasive, identifies what you want people to do as that action, and it will then result in the action that will deliver the results. So that focus on action is the central element you'll see come up time and time again. Another little trilogy, I don't know, well, actually somebody told me years ago when I was really a young guy just getting started, they said, Ed, 3s are the way to present things because people can deal with 3 things at a time. Most logic is based on, the triad or the 3s. And personally, as a content writer or presenter, you probably can't deal with more than 3 things at a time effectively. So you're going to see most things are in 3s. 3's a magic number. But in this case, there are 3 critical success factors that you have to accomplish. If you miss one, you're not going to get any return on investment. I'd like to say if you miss any one of these steps in order, and I'm going to do them in order, you're toast. So let's see what those are. Number 1, when you have an event, you must get the right people to participate. How many of you have ever, and this is just us today, nothing's going to be shared outside, so don't be shy about raising your hand and we'll kind of indulge in a little self-pity every once in a while. How many of you have ever had an executive walk into your exhibit and look around and say, this exhibit looks great, all the colors are right on and the lasers are firing and everything looks wonderful, but there aren't any customers here? What happened? That's what I call a drive-by evaluation. So they come by, they take a look. Executives are pretty smart. They see that everything looks great, but they're not seeing enough customers to make them happy. Why? Because we didn't get enough of the right people. Or have you had the similar circumstance where an executive walks into your exhibit, says, Lynn, everything looks great, it's perfect. and it's even under budget from what I understand. And there are a lot of people here, but I don't think anybody here has the authority or the level of responsibility to actually buy our product. Have you ever had that happen? And again, either one of those circumstances speak to not accomplishing that first step, which is you have to get enough of the right people into the event or into the campaign to make the economics work. So you can figure that out, actually. You can work things backwards to figure out how many people have to be there that fit the target criteria that you set in order to make it pay off. So enough of the right people. And so am I wrong if I say if you don't get enough of the right people, that the other two steps are pretty much academic, right? You don't have people to give the message to who can act upon it. And the people, if they aren't the actors, are not going to be able to do the action. So this is essential as the first step. I'm kind of surprised over the years I've looked at this, how little the amount of pre-show marketing is for people who spend huge amounts of money to be at a trade show. So let's say somebody's spending $80,000 to be at a trade show, or I have a client that spends $6 million on one show. Well, you can bet the one that's $6 million has a tremendous amount of pre-show marketing associated with it. But on the $80,000 one I have in mind, they do almost no pre-show marketing. And frankly, I would say more clients than not don't do a lot of pre-show marketing. Well, it's hard to ignore that if you don't get the right people there, that you can't do anything else. And then the second element is to have the right message. If I can get the people in the room, okay, and you guys represent, by the way, an extremely well-targeted audience who saw pre-marketing campaigns try to get you to see that there was interesting content here that may be beneficial to you, and look at all the filled up chairs. It's fabulous. So now the key is, am I going to be able to tell you anything that you can use and that's going to make your life better and that you decide to go home and do as a result? So that message has to be tailored to the target audience that you've assembled, and it also has to result in some sort of proactivity. So that message is the second module today. We're going to dissect the heck out of that and talk about how that works. And then the third thing is, if you guys all leave here today and don't do anything, then we had a good fellowship time, and you might have been entertained a little bit. You might have actually learned a few things, but it's not going to change anything. So the right action from the participants, the right people being compelled by a persuasive, logical message to take an action, is the critical success triad. If you don't get those things done in that order, you're really not going to have a lot of reportable return on investment. Does that make sense to everybody? So this is my boiling it down for 30 years to some very simple things. Okay, so there are 3 planning questions. Now again, it's just us, let's be honest. How many of you have sat in the meeting to start planning for an upcoming show, and pretty much the first question is, what are we going to show them? What are we going to tell them? Would everybody commit to that? Okay. And that's the normal planning exercise. What are we going to show them and what are we going to tell them? How many of you have ever suffered through, how many of you kind of rent out your exhibit space based on who's contributing budget? So you have like a fourth goes to one division and another fourth to another division and all that. And so everybody wants to take everything they've got and cram it into their little percentage of the exhibit space, right? And then as customers come into the exhibit, they're only interested in the ones who are interested in their particular product lines. And so you got your exhibit that maybe has, it's sort of like going to Disney World. You got the magic, you got the, Adventureland and Fantasyland and whatever in your exhibit, and only people who go there are the ones that that part of the exhibit will talk to. So what are we going to show them and what are we going to tell them kind of leads to that approach. I'm going to suggest there's a whole different question to ask, and I'm going to give you a really tactical, little sneaky way of looking like the smartest person in the room at the next planning meeting that you go to. So when you go to the next planning meeting, let everybody start saying, what are we going to show them? What are we going to tell them? What are we going to put in the booth? We're going to put this, we're going to do that. And then wait until everybody kind of settles down. You know how you always get that pause when everybody's kind of gotten their stuff out on the table. And just say this. Say, let me ask a question. What do we want the people who visit our exhibit at the new, upcoming ABC show, what do we want them to do as a result of the visit? And then be prepared for a lot of silence. And then just suggest, say, shouldn't we really think about what we want the people who visit us to do and then use that as our planning scenario for what we need to show them and what we need to tell them as completely focused on getting them to do what it is we want them to do. That will help us tailor our messages, our content, what we put in the exhibit, which products we show, everything else. If we can answer that question, what do we want them to do, then everything else will be clarified in terms of our planning and our design and our messaging and everything. Does that make sense? And they're going to think you're a freaking genius for asking that, so that's one you can tuck away in your pocket. So the 3 planning questions now, if you believe what I've said so far, are number 1, what do we want the people to do who are going to visit our exhibit? I'm going to tell you a story about that. And number 2, who are the right people that can do that, and how do we define them? And then number 3, what is it we need to tell them in order to get them to do our bidding? How do we get them to do that? Those are the real planning questions. Now, let me give you a great example. Case Equipment Corporation used to spend $2 million a year going to ConExpo, and the executives kept saying, we don't understand why we're spending $2 million. We don't really, this is a boondoggle. We don't get a lot out of this. A lot of people kicking the tires on the tractors. So the sales force whined and moaned for about 10 years to go back to the show, and finally the executive said, okay, we'll go back to the show one more time, but this time when we go back, you better be able to show us how we get payback on that $2 million. So I got called to be the person to figure out the payback and to prove to the executives that the show was or was not worthwhile. And so I went up to a big meeting in Racine. They had a huge conference table that had 60 people around it. And as soon as I walked in the door, they just threw me the football with no warning and said, okay, here's our out-of-town consultant, take it away. So they had the big model in the middle. It was a 200 by 200 yard outside with tractors and skid steers and all little models on it showing what they were going to show at the show. So I said, okay, I better come up with something really smart here. So I'm standing at the front of the table, and I said, this looks great. This is what you're going to show everybody at the show, and there are 120,000 people at this show. That's all great. What do you want them to do? What do you want the people who come to see you to do as a result of visiting you at ConExpo? And you could have heard a pin drop. And then finally, the VP of sales, the head guy for sales, said, Ed, that is exactly the right question. The answer is, if these customers who see us at ConExpo don't go to a dealer after the event, then we won't sell anything because we don't sell, the dealers sell. We don't get any checks from end customers, the dealers do. So we have to get those people we see at the show to go to the dealer in order to sell anything. And our whole campaign changed. And a series of direct marketing elements and a number of other things were employed that got people to the exhibit at ConExpo, but most importantly, took them through the exhibit to the dealer after the event. So you see that action as far as driving the planning became everything. Okay. So let's look at effective targeting for trade shows in terms of steps to success. Cast a wide net. Most people think of trade shows primarily as a way to go and find people to buy from you, generate leads, create sales opportunities. Would most of you agree with that? And that's good. That is actually it is the most popular and the most prominent goal out there. So we're going to talk about widening that net a little bit to more people that can do your business good. Second thing is those who we attract must be those who can act, and this is going to be about defining who actually you can sell to or who you can use to drive down cost. And then we're going to talk about how to find where these people are, how to use the information provided by shows and that sort of thing to make it happen. Okay, so let's start with cast a wide net. If you want to make your show really pay off, there are a few other things to consider. We all know that we want to try to use a trade show to increase our market share or increase our revenue. But how many other things can we do at that show? Let me just start giving you a handful of things that you might want to write down. if I can look for new revenue, can I also protect my existing revenue? Can I make sure that I don't lose my existing customers to competitors who, guess what, are at the show, and what are they trying to do? Take away your customers, am I right? So use the show not only to look for new revenue opportunities, but look to protect your existing revenue opportunities and to grow your existing revenue base by upselling or cross-selling at the show to your existing customer base. So then you've also got the whole channel and distributor scenario who really are technically customers because they write checks to your business. So one of the first stops to make in planning for developing your targets for a show is to sit down with the sales team and say, who should we be inviting and what is it we need to do with them, or what do we want them to do as a result of the visit? So they're going to talk to you not only about prospects and prospecting, they're going to talk to you probably about taking care of existing customers, customer relationship management at the show, cross-selling, upselling, and making sure that you identify customers who are at a potential for loss, and it's already known that they're at a risk of loss, and using the show as a way to stitch up and salvage and patch up that relationship and save the business. Okay. You should be definitely talking to your PR, advertising, and corporate communications folks to find out how they can use the show. They can use the show to accomplish their goals. Maybe they can manage press relationships. They can influence people who are writing editorial, the analysts and the editors in the industry press who are writing statements about the market in general and writing about your company. If they're good, they can go and actually do what's called earning you free media or earned media, where being able to bring the press effective information and things like digital assets like video and product pictures and pictures of things that relate to things that are newsworthy, that you can manage the press to end up with a good deal of free advertising after the event. You show up in the editorials or on the news in industry periodicals. So you want to find out also who your PR have as targets. For example, you may need to try to influence a senator or a representative. You may need to influence a standards body to be able to have your product more easy to sell, or even to be able to sell your product legally may require a change in a regulation. So trade shows are where these people are. So your PR and your advertising people can probably add to your target list. Then operations and customer service. You know, the profit equation has two elements. One, our revenue, and two, our cost, and whatever's left between those two is profit. Trade shows are a tremendous opportunity to reduce cost by doing things using the trade show as a base that are cheaper than doing them otherwise. So if I'm having a big product launch, why would I not go to CES, where they have a huge international broadcast studio, where all of the worldwide press are already present at the show at their own expense, and the news coverage, in addition to my ability to do international broadcast and to use digital media to support it all, is already in place. Why would I want to try to pay to do all that myself by organizing my own product launch up at Chelsea Piers or something in New York at a huge expense? Why would I want to do that? Well, the cost savings associated with doing it at the show are huge, and the increase in effectiveness is huge. And that cost savings may be more than the entire show budget, as an example. Okay. So your operations people and your customer service people may say, while we're at the show, let's invite our existing customers in and teach them this new thing that makes their existing product set work better. Let's teach them what they need to do, how they need to do it, and use it as a customer education opportunity. Or let's have our customer conference 2 days before the show starts on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday show, or let's say on the weekend before the show starts on a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday schedule. Let's have a 2-day customer conference that is aimed at reducing our customer support costs and educating our customers to use our product better and to be more successful. So you can use the show to address customer service and support cost and issues. And then the executive suite. The executive suite is a two-way door. Number one, the executives will have a list of people they really want to talk to. Dwayne Chapman, who was the chairman of Equifax, I went to see him one time, and I didn't get to see him until 2 weeks before the show. I said, Dwayne, who do you want to see at National Retail Federation? He said, Ed, that's a great question. He said, there are 27 people who will be at this show that I want to see. I don't care about the other 10,000, 12, 20,000. There are 27 people that I really need to see. And I said, okay, Dwayne, let's do something out of the box. We'll send them a telegram, which nobody gets a telegram these days, right? But Western Union will still deliver a telegram. I said, let's send them a telegram telling them that you want to meet them personally at the show, and if they will come and meet you, and we'll pre-schedule these things, you will give them an advance copy of the Redgate study. Do you guys remember about 15, 20 years ago when credit reporting privacy became a huge issue in Congress? There was a whole lot going on about credit reporting regulation. Well, the Redgate study was commissioned to address that, and nobody had it. It was going to be released, I'll make up a date, on April 1st. Well, this show was like 2 weeks before that, and Dwayne promised all of those 27 people an advance copy of the Redgate study. We had 24 of the 27 show up. So, and they control millions and millions and millions of dollars of Equifax's business compared to the people in the exhibit that were coming through, that some of them had no relation to Equifax's business, and then some of them, had hundreds of thousands of dollars of potential impact, but these 27 had gazillion dollars of impact. So your executive suite is an important stop. Targeting. Build your target persona. So once you decide that you want to invite people of certain types, because if you have 10 product sets or 10 divisions or whatever it is, you're going to have target profiles for each of those probably. But you want to look at things like geography. My defense clients, for example, would start the year by saying, we want to target companies in the Middle East for growth this year, or we want to target India, or whatever it may be. So there may be geographic considerations. And then beyond that, there are always, what industry segments are we looking for? What types of companies? So if I say my industry segment target is transportation, but specifically I'm looking for logistics and warehousing type company type. And then job functions. What types of people am I looking for? I'm looking for executive management. I'm looking for fleet operators. I'm looking for operations managers, whatever it may be. And then specifically, what titles are they within those functions? So this is a slide you need to refer back to when you get home. You want to define your target audience as what geography, what company industry, what company types, what functions are we targeting, what are the job titles that we're targeting, and if you can, what are the names of those individuals? And those names of the individuals are available more often than you think. Okay. So we have to know who's there that we can draw from. So there are show demographics. Now let's talk about one of the weaknesses of the industry. How many of you have shows where you can't get hardly any information about who's there by the things I'm talking about? Does it make you extremely mad like it does me? Yeah, it just infuriates me because you guys are paying big money to be there, and then they turn their nose up and say, well, no, we're not going to tell you who's here. We're not even going to give you a breakdown of who's here. We're not going to, and then from there it goes up to shows that I'm going to show you that give you everything you want to know. And those are the good shows. Those are the ones where you should be increasing your investment. And the shows that won't share with you, you really should be putting some pressure on them. I told someone in a customer meeting yesterday, I said, you know what? Any show where you're a sponsor and you're paying extra bucks to the show should come with the caveat that they give you the show information about attendees. And if they won't give you the actual attendee list, then they give you access for them to do your mailings or for them to do your email blasts and for you to be able to filter down to the people that you want to see. So put the pressure on them, guys, absolutely. And say, look, if you can't support me, I can't support you. I'm a marketeer. I need to know this stuff. This is how I make my living. If you can't support me in this, then your show's not the vehicle that it needs to be. All right. So here's an example, though, of the opposite end of that spectrum where the show manager is providing wonderful information. Look at this. This is ProMat. How many of you are familiar with like ProMat and Modex? Okay, and ConExpo, ConAg. These are all shows that I have done a lot of work with. So here are the job function breakdowns. Here's the breakdown of people that actually qualify in buying roles versus those who do not. Here's their product interest. How'd you like for a show manager to tell you there are 10,000 people here out of 50,000 that are interested in your product, and here's who they are? That'd be pretty good, right? And so you'll need to look at this in some detail, but here's another show, specifically job function, all detailed out about who the job functions are and how many of them there are. The geographical breakdowns, look at the international component. There's no way to save more money for your company than going to a show that has a huge international attendance and not having to travel across the pond to try to see those same people. The cost savings is huge. Remember I told you the client with the $6 million budget? That $6 million budget is for an air show in Europe, and they completely cost justified that $6 million budget on reduced travel expense and the expense of moving heavy, expensive assets like airplanes around to do things around the world. Ted, would you find me a bottle of water? Thanks. Can you believe that, to completely justify the budget on nothing but travel expense and logistical expense avoidance? How'd you like to do that? With no consideration of impact on sales or anything else, the whole thing's justified. Thank you, buddy. Let me take a swig just a minute. So, not every show will give you this. Some shows will. For the shows that won't, or maybe you haven't researched this level of detail before, but this is tremendously important. I'm going to boil it down to a really simple, real chart from a customer of mine. Well, actually, I'll show you this first. Here's another one that's really broken down their job functions, the industry groupings, product categories of their interest, job functions, the size of company, the number of people who actually have buying authority, et cetera. So, it's here. And you can do one of two things. You can either research this yourself, or you can use your providers like Gateway to get this information assembled for you ahead of time. And whoever you're using, for example, to do your direct marketing before the show can go get this for you, or can rent the list or arrange with the show to actually provide show-provided email blasting or direct marketing mailing services, okay? So here's my simple thing that I did for Owens Corning at the composite show. And there's a really important lesson in this. So we found out that at the composite show that the mix of industries or types of companies that were at that show were 50% of them were from the transportation segment, and then marine, custom molding, aerospace, compression, et cetera, et cetera. I love that word pultrusion. I don't know what that is, but it sounds fun. All the way down to electric and electronic. Well, guess what? The electric and electronic division within Owens Corning wanted to bring everything in the kitchen sink and put it in their corner of the exhibit because they were contributing to the budget. And so we had a meeting and we showed them the chart. And we said, okay, do we think we should spend most of our floor space and time and resources here, or should we give up some of this in order to be here? And the final decision was these guys had some important contacts to make, but it made more sense for them to have a room off of the show floor, invite those important contacts in, have very specific demos only for that, electrical and electronic, and they took care of it off of the exhibit floor, and then we kept the exhibit floor available for the biggest amount of traffic with these interests. But isn't that telling how it looks when you just plot it out and you say, okay, wow, that's a pretty good picture of what's going on there. And that becomes part of your planning. So you can get attendee lists sometimes from the shows. They'll give you the names and the titles and the companies, but they won't give you the email or the phone. That's okay, because they have a couple of things in play there. Protecting the confidentiality of the attendees, and frankly, they're really more worried about giving their competitors information their competitors can use to steal them away to go to another show. But why not just get the list from your industry periodicals? Call up if you're in the car wash industry, call up Car Wash Today and find out how much their list costs, and they'll give you all the emails and the phone numbers and everything for the company size, the titles, the functions, and the individual responsibilities that we talked about earlier. You can buy it. They're going to be the same people going to the show. It's just going to be more of them. Which brings up the point. Why would I not market to everybody on that list instead of just trying to market to the people that are coming to the show? In a world of electronic communications and marketing, it costs me almost zero to market to 10,000 people compared to 5,000 people, right? So why wouldn't I want to take my beautifully crafted messages and send them out to the additional 5,000 people who fit my target profile? And all the people in your own marketing database. CRM information. You've got the customer information in your files. You need to find out of those who are going to the show. But the same point applies. Why not communicate the new plans, the new terms, what you're going to show at the show to all your customers, using the show as a newsworthy item, an excuse? Why would you not communicate with them, including the ones who are going to be at the show? So then we get to practical applications. So these are some matrices where I'm going to show you how this sort of fits together and how to make it work. You're going to adapt it to your own approach. But what we start with is a series of action steps and the associated targets. Okay, so let's see how this works. Now, the first one is really kind of an incomplete chart, but I suggest that one way to look at who you might want to target is to look at your sources of profitability. What kind of targets do we want to hit the revenue goal, new revenue? What kind of targets do we want to protect our existing revenue? Those would be existing customers. What are the range of targets that we want to include in our promotion plan? How many different types of individuals are we trying to reach visually, audibly, experientially? Who are we trying to broadcast to? And then finally, who are our targets for cost reduction? Maybe we want to invite all our suppliers at the show in and say, look, we need a reduction in cost, or we need better logistics, or more just-in-time capability. We need higher quality. We need you to locate a warehouse by our factory that we're going to build next year. All of those things drive down your cost of doing business, and that's a whole nother list of target contacts. But the marketing end of it sort of looks like this. If I have that, this is from the composite show, and this is real stuff here. So if I'm going to the composite show and I have a target who are senior managers of large marine end customers. So what does that translate to that you could understand? They're boat builders. They're people who build fiberglass boats or composite boats. So my action step is going to be for a senior manager to get that senior manager in the exhibit to engage in a demo that is actually an estimator of how much faster they can build boats that are actually of higher quality and will result in a higher sale price. And that estimator takes their data about their assembly line now and their current processes and calculates for them what the improvements will be. And I want to get them started in the exhibit by bringing them to the demo and getting them on the demo. But then I want to give them a card when they're partway through that says you can continue this at home, or you can give this to a group at home and have them fill out more data, and it'll give you even a more detailed view of what this is about. So my action step is to get them involved at the booth, but then continue at home. And if they will do that, then the sales team picks up those results from the estimator, goes out and has a consultation with them based on the facts that they provided. All right, so you see how the action step and the targets are paired off here? Now, what about distributors and channels? Here's one. For the owners and vice president of sales of large distributorships, my action step is going to get them to join the dealer network application and to commit to a sign-up visit from the sales team that signs on new distributors. That's my action step. Now, is that clear? So do you see the benefit of just putting this down in a matrix for your own effort and trying to figure out who you really got to see, what you want to ask them to do, et cetera? Okay. So, Ted, I'm going to turn it back to Ted to talk for a little while because he's better at this than I am, and I need a sip of water.
It's thirsty, I think is really what it is.
Oh, is it working? Okay, good.
Could I get the clicker from you, Ed, please? Thank you, sir. So after you've established your target profiles and done the work that you can to research the availability of the contact information for those targeted profiles, you want to actually reach out to them, right? And invite them to participate in the experiences and promotions that you're going to be offering at the show. And in today's modern, digital, hyper-connected world, there are many more ways to reach out and provide these invitations than ever before. We'll look at a couple of these. These are also detailed in the booklet that you received this morning. So, Appreciate email campaign, it's obviously nothing new. Folks have been doing it since the dawn of the World Wide Web, but today's newest generation of marketing automation software can ensure that you're getting into your target's inboxes with the right message at the right time based off of the digital actions and the digital fingerprints that they've left. Certainly a very powerful tool in establishing a regular cadence of communication with your targets leading up to the show. A second invitation channel is good old direct mail. Now, may have a little bit of a negative connotation from the junk mail stack I'm sure everybody has sitting at home on their kitchen table. But in a B2B invitation context, a direct mail piece, properly timed and properly designed, can have great impact. Particularly, many of our partners have had very good success with what we call dimensional mail, or lovingly referred to as lumpy mail, right? Something that has a little heft to it, a little size to it, some dimensionality that makes it stick out from the rest of the communications they receive. A third outreach channel, and as Ed alluded to earlier, possibly the most effective, particularly for your executive and C-suite level targets, is that personal outreach. Have your senior sales staff, have your executive suite reaching out personally via phone, networking events, et cetera, to make sure that those pre-scheduled meetings with high-value targets are set well in advance of the show. And then you want to get social, right? So Twitter can be a great way to take advantage of a larger communication network. Almost every show establishes their own hashtag these days. Start tagging your posts with those tags. Most shows are also displaying that Twitter feed continuously throughout the show on large video wall style installations or a large LED screen towards the entrance, and that can be a great way to continue to grab more impressions throughout the show. Nobody can ignore the 800-pound gorilla, Facebook, particularly if you're a B2C company interacting directly with consumers. You've got to be where your targets are at, and they're certainly on Facebook. It's a low-cost, low-effort way to get your message out and then have it amplified through your target's own personal networks. And then LinkedIn, again, in a B2B context primarily, connect directly with your targets if you've been able to identify them by name, by company, et cetera. Send them a message through LinkedIn. You also want to be looking at LinkedIn groups where your targets may be congregating and looking for content, educational content, things of value to them, and be posting your messages, posting your content, and providing them value through those groups. And then lastly, microsites, small digital websites, mobile optimized, that speak clearly to the promotions, messages, et cetera, that you'll be kind of activating at the show, trade show or event. In addition to reviewing invitation channels, talking about invitation scheduling and frequency. So we've found that the most effective messaging campaigns and invitation campaigns begin at least 3 months and sometimes up to 6 months in advance of the event. And you want to be hitting those targets with a regular cadence of communication throughout that 3 to 6 months, whether that's once weekly, twice monthly. Once somebody's accepted an invitation, you want to continue to kind of build on that interaction and build on that agreement they've made to visit with you with additional educational messages and things that they'll find of value. And then lastly, to kind of expand on that point, the content of your invitation. We'll talk quite a bit more about how to construct appropriate messages in our second session, but the best messaging, best marketing messaging, presents a very clear balance between benefit for the receiver of the message and benefit for the company giving the message. So you want to be thinking very carefully about how to construct those messages that are clearly providing value to your targets while also hopefully inducing action that will produce value for your companies. And with that, I will turn it back to Ed to discuss targeting measurement and improvement.
All right. Thank you, Ted. So one of the things since I started working with Gateway here is we have started to tag on how do we measure the effectiveness of what we just talked about, and from that measurement can we identify how to continuously improve it. And so for your measurement programs for your own exhibit marketing program, that should be the main goals. How do we assess how well it's working and what the potential value of that is, and how do we report it internally? But the other thing is, through the measurement, can we identify how to improve? And that becomes really a big part of your credibility. And by the way, all my 30 years of doing this, one of my ever-present goals was always to make the exhibit manager, the director, marketing manager, whoever I was dealing with as a client, successful in their career. And so I developed almost everything I developed over those years with the idea of personal success for the people that I was going to teach it to. So this idea of continuous improvement will give you the reputation internally of being somebody who not only does a good job, but is also taking it up into the clouds at every opportunity. So let's look at a few ways to measure what we've talked about this morning. Well, if I'm targeting correctly, I should be able to look at my entire promotional effort, and that would be my direct marketing, pre-marketing campaigns. It would be any presence I have at the show through sponsorships. It would be the media where I have presence, for example, on the show website, your own websites, on any kind of video that plays at the show, the big video screen, the wall, aisle banners, escalator, wraps, whatever. But my impressions I make are exposures for the company and your messages to the eyes of our targeted individuals. And those have a great deal of value, and they can be counted. Somebody asked a question? Sorry, okay. Targeted visitor interactions. You should be able to count not only the number of people who come to your exhibit, but how many of those become actively engaged, and how many of those people who became actively engaged actually fit your target profiles. In that case study I told you about, Case Equipment Corporation, we actually identified literally everybody who came in by having them bring or be listed in a database of having received the pre-mailer. Guess what? If they weren't on the pre-mail list, they actually weren't a qualified lead. That's how thoroughly we had developed that list by the time the show ran. So how many targeted visitor interactions do we have? How many prospect meetings did we hold? Or people who were prospects, how many demos did they participate in? So this is really getting down to counting the interactions, not just their presence. Customer meetings. How many customer meetings did we schedule during this last event? How many did we schedule versus how many happened, so we can understand our effectiveness of our campaign to get customers to interact with us? How many at-show action steps were taken? You remember the example of getting the large marine end customer to actually get into the estimator demo in the exhibit? Well, that becomes at-show action step. Then how many actually took the after-show action step of continuing that in more detail? So the post-show action steps are really your ultimate measure of success, because those are what leads to return on investment. And by the way, when you have meetings with customers, or you have meetings with suppliers, or you have meetings with the press, most of you, how many of you have as your one of your primary measures, how many leads do you get? Okay, a lot of you. So let me give you another one. Every kind of interaction and meeting that you have at the show should have a specific goal, and that is to result in a follow-up. And that's what my big clients who don't take leads, like Defense has a 10-year sales cycle. Well, they don't take leads at shows. We had 2 clients here yesterday for private meetings, and one of them does not take any leads at shows. And so we talked about the goal for the interactions must become to have a follow-up. And if there's a follow-up, there's something that's going to happen. If there is no follow-up, you just had a meeting. So consider that as your additional goal beyond leads. So here's my question. I told you I always set the bar this way. How many of you got something out of this discussion that you can actually put to work? Thank you. All right, good. That's the bar.